Housed at number 9 Marketplace, Hitchin, the well-esteemed Halsey's Delicatessen and Tearooms occupies a location rich in history. During renovations about 4 decades ago, a Tudor fireplace was uncovered, hinting at the building's heritage dating back to roughly 1500. After meticulous cleaning, the fireplace revealed a series of markings and dates, the earliest of which corroborates the era of its earliest occupants. According to a 16th century survey of Hitchin Rectory conducted by Trinity College, the establishment was once part of a building called the Parsonage House. The site later transitioned into a pub known as the Artichoke from 1767 to 1847. In his History of Hitchin, Reginald Hine provided a fascinating anecdote about a football game in 1772, with the matchball landing in the Artichoke's doorway. Notably, Frederick Draper, a local traveller born in 1797 who lived until the ripe age of 105, was a frequent musical guest at the Artichoke, where he would play his fiddle. Between 1878 and 1926, Martha Flint, an accomplished milliner, first used the building. It went on to serve as the site for Martha Flint's and Ebenezer Allsop's, before finally becoming exclusively Ebenezer Allsop's, a gentleman's millinery shop. Interestingly, members of Halsey's staff have occasionally reported encountering Martha Flint's ethereal presence. She did, in fact, live on the premises for a period, along with her apprentice, Beatrice Hayden. In 1948, the building came under the proprietorship of G.W. Halsey and Son, a name it would retain even after it changed hands and was acquired by Jacksons of Piccadilly Lented many years later. Mrs. Halsey's departure, 1899. We bring you a solemn recounting from the annals of 1899, marking the departure of a remarkable woman, Mrs. Halsey, beloved wife of Mr. George Halsey of Nettledale Road. Mrs. Halsey's battle with illness began some 3 weeks before her passing. Despite calling in a specialist who held out little hope, she showed signs of improvement. Sadly, her condition worsened as the week drew to a close, and she peacefully passed away on Monday evening. Pneumonia, following an influenza attack, was the culprit. Born into the Ambrose family, Mrs. Halsey's roots were intertwined with Hitchin's vibrant commercial heart. Her father's shop once occupied the very site, now held by the esteemed Messrs. G. Halsey and Son. Mrs. Halsey was not just a merchant's daughter. She was a pillar of her community, particularly within the Baptist congregation. For years, she was deeply involved with the Tilehouse Street Baptist Church, and since its inception, she dedicated herself to the Woolsworth Road Baptist Church. Alongside her husband, she held significant roles in both places of worship. Her contributions didn't stop at church commitments. Mrs. Halsey was a vital member of the management committee for the British schools and actively engaged in numerous philanthropic endeavours around town. Sympathy poured in for the Halsey family as they mourned their loss. Mrs. Halsey's funeral was held on a solemn Friday afternoon, drawing family and friends alike to bid farewell to a woman who had given so much to her community. Let us remember Mrs. Halsey not only for her dedication and service, but also for the warmth and compassion she brought into the lives of those around her. Mr. George Halsey, 1911. A true Hitchin legend, Mr. George Halsey. A jack of all trades, George was not just a tradesman, but also a star on the Urban District Council and Board of Guardians. He gave up his bustling business in later years, settling into serene retirement on Highbury Road, and later, the Avenue. Not blessed with the sturdiest of health, George finally took ill a few weeks back and left us last Thursday. George's life story is one to be admired, a tale of grit and honour. He started from scratch, without a single connection to hobnob him up the ladder. Yet through sheer industry and integrity, he became a respected tradesman, all without resorting to flashy antics or self-promotion. George was the town's favourite, known for his simplicity and genuine manners. Despite his unassuming nature, public roles landed on his lap because of his evident business acumen, ensuring he won every election he stood for. George's journey began as a humble lad working in a shop at Marketplace. After honing his skills in London, he returned to take over the business from Mr. William Millard at the tender age of 22. Fast forward 56 years, George had married his beloved Miss Ambrose, who passed away 12 years ago, and together they raised 6 children, 3 sons and 3 daughters. George was a devout Baptist, earning esteemed places at the Tile House Street and later the Walsworth Road churches. He donned many hats: deacon, Sunday school superintendent, organist, and an active member of the choral society, collaborating with notable figures such as the late Mr. William Carling. In 1891, George took his first step into public service on the local Board of Health, the precursor to the Urban District Council, and continued to serve until 1901. An unyielding public servant, he also graced the Board of Guardians, the Hospital Board, the Burial Board, and several other local institutions. A dedicated Liberal, he had an energetic role in the county's parliamentary elections before Hertfordshire's division in 1885. George's final send-off was conducted on Wednesday in true Hitchin fashion. The service at Walsworth Road Baptist Church was solemn, with organist Mr. H.G. Molden setting the mood with "O Rest in the Lord." Reverends N. Dobson and W.J. Harris led the service and gave a moving address. As the cortege left, Chopin's March Funèbre filled the air. At the cemetery, surrounded by family and friends, including sons Arthur and Leonard, brother Joseph, and many more, Mr. Dobson completed the committal service. The simple oak coffin, without adornment but for its brass inscription, George Halsey, died May 18, 1911, aged 78 years, was laid to rest. Mr. Halsey was commemorated without wreaths by his own request. Messrs. W. and A. Foster, the undertakers, saw to his final journey. As we too pay our respects in spirit, let's remember George not just for his public service, but for the warmth and integrity that made him a pillar of Hitchin. On April 10, 1919, a significant theft occurred at Messrs. Halsey, grocers, Market Square, where the errand boy, Mr. Abbis, was discovered to have stolen £25, 5 shillings. The scheme was uncovered when the cash in the shop's desk was counted before the staff went to dinner and then again upon their return, revealing a discrepancy of 5 guineas. Following the discovery, a watch was set up to monitor the shop, ultimately leading to Mr. Abbis being caught. Upon being searched, £23, 8 shillings and 11 pence were found on him. His father swiftly returned this money to the firm. The case was brought before the Hitchin Petty Sessions, where Mr. Abbis, represented by Mr. Passingham, pleaded guilty. Mr. Passingham acknowledged that the theft brought disgrace not only on Mr. Abbis, but also on his family. Testimonies painted a picture of Mr. Abbis as a responsible person who had held a respectable position for several years. Mr. W. H. Corbett, headmaster of the British school, testified that Mr. Abbis was once a vice-captain of the senior class, but lost this position following the theft. Corbett emphasized that Mr. Abbis was deeply conscious of his shame and remorseful for his actions. The court decided to place Mr. Abbis on probation for 1 year, acknowledging that his father had already punished him. The chairman expressed hope that this incident would serve as a stern lesson for Mr. Abbis, aiding in his correction. Despite the gravity of the theft, the court's leniency aimed to give Mr. Abbis an opportunity for rehabilitation, rather than imposing a harsher punishment. In comparing the prices of household items between 1812 and 1893, a dramatic change in the cost of living becomes apparent, reflecting significant economic progress and advancements in trade and production efficiencies. For instance, in 1812, the cost of £1 of tea was a hefty 10 shillings, while £1 of green tea commanded an even steeper price of 12 shillings. By 1893, the price of tea had dramatically dropped, with half a pound of black tea costing only 1 shilling and 10 pence per pound, and green tea at 2 shillings per pound. Candles, an essential household item during the era, also showed a substantial price decrease. In 1812, 3 pounds of candles cost 1 shilling per pound, whereas by 1893, the same quantity was just 4 pence per pound. Sugars followed a similar trend. Moist sugar, which was 10 pence per pound in 1812, was notably cheaper by 1893, although specific prices for the latter are not detailed. The trend suggests a significant reduction. Likewise, loaf sugar priced at 1 shilling per pound in 1812 had also become more affordable by 1893. The affordability extended to other common household items, such as currants, raisins, allspice, yellow soap, pepper, nutmegs, cloves, and coffee. The overall decrease in prices from 1812 to 1893 highlights the increased accessibility of everyday goods, leading to an improved standard of living.